So, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are almost here. In fact, at the time of recording, it's only 3 days away. Wow, where did the time go? And in all this time, I still haven't figured out which starter I'm going to go with, at least not 100%. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about my thought process and maybe we'll figure out what starter I'm going with. Okay, but before we do that, I'm going to go over all the other starters and all the other games and talk about which one I picked so we can kind of get a feel on my decision making process here because it's kind of an interesting little journey I was realizing as I went throughout all the different games. So I started with Gen 1 and I went with Charmander because of course I did. Because like with many kids, I wanted the cool fire dragon that was on the cover. So that technically makes Charmander, and I guess by extension Charizard, my first ever Pokemon. It's no wonder I have a soft spot for him no matter how much Game Freak shoves him down our throat. But yeah, I went with Charmander. Even if though that was, the hard mode, not knowing that. But whatever, I didn't care. I didn't care. I was a kid. I only cared that it looked cool. And it's funny because as time went on, how the starters looked became less and less important to me. Like, it was always important, of course. But I came to learn that there's much more to a Pokemon than how it looks. So anyway, Gen 2 came around, and I went with Chikorita. Just because I thought it was cute. Because I wasn't really big on any of them. I think that Gen 2 might be my least favorite out of all of them. Not that they're bad. I don't think they're bad. I don't think there is not a bad trio of starters. I firmly believe that. There may be some that I'm not big on, but I don't think there's like a bad starter in the bunch of any, really. But I went with Chikorita because I thought it was the cutest. But this was, I think, the only time I really regretted the decision of my starter because, well, the first two gyms were Bug and Flying, which was not great, and Chikorita is just easily the worst for this region overall. And this is actually the only time I ever picked the Grass starter, and I think this is the reason why, is because I had such a bad time with Chikorita that it, like, scarred me for life. But, and here's the thing about the starters in terms of the types, grass, water, fire. The type does kind of matter sometimes. Because when Gen 3 came around, the only reason I picked Torchic was because at the time, Fire was my favorite type. It's not anymore, but it was at the time, and that's pretty much why I went with Torchic over Mudkip and Trico, because I think the Gen 3 starters are all great. Like, I really love the Gen 3 starters. And it probably would have been a hard choice had Fire not been my favorite type at the time. Because here's the thing with the types. Another reason I don't choose Grass is because it's just not a good type. Like, it has a ton of weaknesses, and everything that it beats, like rock, ground, and water, can easily be taken down by other better types. Rock and ground can be handled by water, which is a much better type, and water can be handled by electric. And I always have a water and electric types on my team, because water is just a great versatile type, and not to mention you always needed Surf back in the day. And electric was a really good type, too. So I never needed a grass type. I can't remember the last time I even had a playthrough where I used a grass type on my team. So it's one of the main reasons why I just never chose the grass type, really. Okay, so moving on. Gen 4, I chose Piplup only because I hadn't chosen the water starter up to that point. And since I wasn't big on any of them, like, they're all good. I think the Gen 4 starters are all really good, especially their final evolutions. But I went with Piplup, and I'm glad I did because Water Steel on Empoleon was amazing at the time. At the time, the Steel type was really, really good, and Water Steel was unique, purely unique at the time. So that was really cool. Then after Gen 4, I kind of got out of Pokemon for a little while. I don't have time to explain the reasons why. But so I skipped Black and White and X and Y, but I played X and Y after Sword and Shield. It's actually the most recent Pokemon game I've played, at least out of the mainline games. So, but we'll get to that. So yeah, I don't know which one I would have picked if I played Black and White. I'm not big on any of the starters, so I don't know who I would have picked. But moving on to X and Y. So since I didn't play this game when it came out, it was like the only time where I knew the final evolutions. The only time I ever knew that before was Gen 1, because 2 of the 3 of them were on the covers. Blastoise and Charizard were right there in your face on the cover, so. But, yeah, XY, I'm not big on any of them, really. Like, I don't think they're bad. I actually think the X and Y starters are overhated. The Chespin line is okay. Like, it doesn't do much for me, but it's all right. But I think it's a little overhated in some ways. The Greninja line, it's not. I mean, it was pushed hard by Game Freak, so that's why I didn't pick it because I think I was over Greninja at the time. I was just like enough. It's not as bad as Charizard, but it was getting there. So I didn't want to pick that. So I went with Fennekin, and I'll just say this: Delphox gets way too much hate. This is why I think just judging a Pokemon by its looks is just wrong, because Delphox is actually a great Pokemon. Fire Psychic is pretty unique, and it was a good Pokemon. I used it throughout my whole playthrough. It was really good. So I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna say it. It's underrated, overhated for sure. And strictly because of how it looks. That's the only reason people hate it. That's the only reason I've ever heard, at least. Anytime people ask why don't you like Delphox, like, oh, I don't like the way it looks. I didn't like how the Fire Witch Fox thing just, it could have been better. It's like, yeah, well, a lot of Pokemon could have been better, but so what? It's what we got, and I don't think it's that bad. Okay, moving on to Sun and Moon. Now, this is the only time where I did not know. Like, I was on that starter select screen for who knows how long, because all three of them are great. They're my favorite trio of starters. They're all just really, really good. And I didn't know their final evolutions at the time, because it was funny too, because I didn't play Sun and Moon when they came out. I played them well. I think actually Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon were getting ready to come out. I don't think they'd come out yet, because I probably would have gone with them, but they were going to come out. And I was kind of feeling nostalgic for Pokemon because I hadn't played it for many years, so I decided to give it a try. So I knew nothing about these new games or the starters, and I just loved the way they all looked. That's the problem with jumping into something and you have no, like, you didn't even think about it. Just like, oh, I was like, oh gosh, I need to pick a starter now. So I eventually went with Poplio, and I'm very glad I did. Best decision I ever made in Pokemon, because Primarina is my favorite Pokemon of all time. Hands down, no comparison. It was also my introduction to the Fairy type, because like I said, I skipped X and Y when they came out, so it was really great, and Fairy type is one of my favorite types now. So yeah, definitely great decision, though Incineroar and Decidueye are really good too. So then we go to Sword and Shield, and I wasn't big on any of them, really, and this is the only time where the final evolution made a difference since Gen 1. Because most of the time I didn't know what the final evolutions were going to be, but this time I did, because the leaks came out and everyone was talking about it, and even if I had wanted to avoid it, I probably wouldn't have been able to. And yes, I have seen the final evolutions for Scarlet and Violet, which I will not be going over, because not only do I want to avoid spoilers, but it made little to no effect on my decision. So, again, back to Sword and Shield. Because of the final evolutions, the choice became pretty easy for me. I went with Scorbunny. I'm not that big on Cinderace, but I liked it more than the final evolutions of Grookey and Sobble. I mean, I think in Grookey's case, it's like we already had so many monkey and ape Pokemon. We've even had a grass monkey before, So it's like, that wasn't anything new, and I wasn't huge on it. And with Sobble, I was like, eh. I mean, even the first form, the thing was cute, but it was crying all the time. I was like, it's a little annoying. And Inteleon, I think Inteleon gets a little bit too much hate, but I can kind of see where people are coming from. But at the same time, I still think it's pretty funny. I thought it was kind of funny, so I don't hate Inteleon at all. I just wasn't big on any of them. Like I said, I just picked Scorbunny because I liked it the most, and even then, wasn't too huge on it, but it was fine. Now we finally get to Scarlet and Violet. So, when I first saw these three, I liked them all. They're fine, but much like with a lot of starters that I talked about, I just thought they were all fine. Nothing really jumped out at me. And before I saw the leaks, I was like, I had my own ideas of what they would look like. Except for Quaxley, I had no idea where Quaxley was going to go, because we've had so many water types, we've had so many flying types, we have so many bird Pokemon and stuff like that. It's like, and what we've seen, they could go any way. You just never know. So I had no idea where Quaxley's going to go, but I had a pretty good idea where Fuecoco and the grass cat, was it Sprigarito? Whatever, I can never pronounce that. Sprigato? I don't know. Sprigarito, whatever. Yeah. Weed cat. The weed cat, yeah. I had a good idea where those two were going to go. So I don't really know which one I'm going to go with. This may come down to a type thing. I don't think I'm going to pick Spaghetto or whatever. The spaghetti. I'm going to pick Spaghetti Cat because I already explained why I don't pick the grass starters very much. The one time I did, I regretted it, and again, just not a type that I use. You know, if we're going by type usage, because I did a video on that. Actually, you can go check it out. I use the water type the most out of any of the three starting types. A huge reason for that is not only is it pretty much the best type out of all of them, but it's the most common, so you're always going to be using water types pretty much. Not to mention in the old games you needed a Pokemon that could use Surf. You don't need that anymore, but it's still good to have, so it seems like Quaxley would be a good choice, but the thing is, there's a huge abundance of water types, like I said, so it's not like I will be starved for water types. Fire types, maybe. You never know, because depending on the game, sometimes fire types are very rare. Looking at you, Gen 4. But I don't think that's going to be a problem this time. I think I am going to go with Fuecoco, because it's been a while since I picked the fire starter. Actually, technically that's not true. I picked Fennekin, I forgot. No, and I picked Scorbunny. Actually, I've been picking the fire starters a lot for some reason. Why is that? I don't know. Actually, I feel like I have picked the fire starters the most out of all of them, now that I think about it, because, like I said, in the early days it was my favorite type, and even though it's not anymore, I still like the fire type. And I think the reason I don't pick the water type more often is because, like I said, they're so abundant, and there's just so many choices, and there's usually a better choice than the starter sometimes, you know? Heck, I usually end up using Gyarados. Gyarados is everywhere, and it's a great Pokemon. You can get it at level 20, because Magikarp's always everywhere, and it has Intimidate. It's got a really decent typing, as long as you keep it away from electric types, and it's just an overall powerful Pokemon that you can get pretty early, so I think I've used Gyarados in every generation it's been in, because of how easy it is to get, and how powerful it is. So yeah, I'm going to go with Fuecoco, so there you go. That's the one I'm going with, but I can totally understand going with the other two. I think, again, no spoilers, but I think out of all of the evolution lines, I think the Weed Cat was actually my favorite, and I probably would have picked it had it not been a grass type, you know? But I like the other ones too. The other ones are fine, and I think Fuecoco's is pretty cool too. So that's what I'm going with. It's going to be Fuecoco, so hashtag FueCocoFam, or FueCocoFriends as Arlo did it. Yeah, I just saw his video on that, and that didn't affect my decision at all either. No one else's opinion has ever affected my decision. I've always made my own decisions. That's how it is. So tell me what starter you're going with and why. And I'll see you next time, where I'll probably be talking about my opinions on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So I'll see you next time.